Hi family, it's African Esquire and I'm here with a new video. This is going to be a Hot Topics video. However, I do want to warn you, I am a little under the weather, so my voice is not going to sound as clearly as I would like it to. But I did want to talk about this before the weekend was up. So everyone at this point has heard about the Black Panther movie, I know for sure. You've seen great advertisements on the internet and on TV. And of course, this is going to be a weekend where a lot of people go see that movie, particularly because it's Valentine's Day weekend. And so a lot of people work on Valentine's Day. And so they're probably going to take their significant other out to see the movie this weekend. However, some Black people feel like there's a moral issue here with going to see the Black Panther movie. And this was evidenced by a petition on change.org. So if you haven't seen this story, and I'm sure that most people have, the idea was from someone that because the Black Panther movie, for the most part, is marketed exclusively to the Black population, the Black demographic. It's heavily marketed to the Black demographic. More than likely, it's going to be heavily profited by the Black demographic. Seeing that the Black demographic is the poorest or among the poorest demographics, there's always a debate between, is it the Black demographic that's the poor or is it the Native American? It's one of the two. But the Black demographic is of the poorest demographics in America. Given that, should the film creators, who ultimately are Marvel, but for this movie, it's the Black Panther film creators, should they contribute 25% of their profits to the Black community? And the person who came up with this idea said that this would essentially operate as a boycott, to where if Marvel does not donate 25% of the proceeds of that movie to the Black community, that they would essentially boycott the movie and not see it. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to first talk about the boycott aspect. I, more now than ever, do not take us seriously when we're talking about boycotting things, especially things that we want to see. As a consumer, you are essentially sold things. You're made to want something. You're made to want to buy something. And Black people, we are heavily there's a lot of people trying to get us to be their consumers. We're heavily advertised to, for example. And I have no doubt in my mind that for the most part, Black people are going to support this film. I think it's really important that people stop pulling out the boycott idea just so freely without an actual means to the end. So, for example, if Marvel did not ever give you 25% of their profits, so does that mean that I am saying I will never watch that movie? No matter what, if I see that movie in a DVD store, I'm not allowed to pick up that movie because of a boycott idea that I had way back when. Realistically, no, you're not going to do that. If you want to see the movie, you're going to see the movie. And this was really evident to me during the Super Bowl. I'll say for me, like, after the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, and I've never been a sports person per se, ever, but after that, I more so have issue looking at football, personally. So for me personally, and I don't judge anyone who got over that, because at the end of the day, you have your own moral convictions, I have mine. But me personally, understanding the slave culture of the NFL and other sports teams, it's very difficult for me to enjoy a sport such as football or basketball, where the talents of Black people are making white people billionaires. And Black people are so happy to be millionaires that they'll use their talents to make other people billionaires. So if you think about it, for example, could you imagine a sport that is predominantly white? So we'll use a sport such as golf or tennis, hockey, those sports that are predominantly white. Could you imagine that in those sports where white people are primarily the talent, there being all black owners. You probably couldn't imagine that. Could you imagine all Asian owners? You probably couldn't imagine that either, because other people have it instilled in them that if anyone is going to profit off of their own talents, it's going to be their own people in their own community. So for me personally, with the NFL, I was just done because I can't get over the fact that we're so willing to give our hard-earned talents to the money-making machine that ultimately supports white supremacy. Others, I realized, got over the whole NFL boycott rather quickly, and it didn't necessarily take something significant to do that. It just took time. Ultimately, in the social media universe, you might have, a trend going, and other people are giving into that trend, and other people are essentially hyping it up, and other people are causing conviction in the community to feel a certain way. And once that hyping up is no longer the case, once it's no longer the case that something is popular on social media, people quickly forget. So I noticed a lot of people who were talking about they're not watching NFL, they're boycotting, probably a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, and especially when it got close to the playoffs and the Super Bowl, you notice that most of those people were right back watching it, despite everything that they had a problem with how Colin Kaepernick was treated. This is the problem with saying you're going to boycott something. Boycott it until when? With the Montgomery bus boycott, I think these people had it in their mind, we're going to do this until our legs fall off if necessary. When you realize the sacrifices that they were making, it wasn't just people saying, all right, well, I'm not going to ride the bus, I'm going to walk around the corner. No, there were literally people who walked miles, old women walking miles to work because there was a boycott that was out there. Now, the other ironic thing about boycotts is ideally Black people, whenever we're not happy with a certain industry, we would essentially say, okay, let's make our own. So, for example, one of the biggest ironies of the Montgomery bus boycott, Black people essentially fought to be able to sit in the front of the bus. But during that whole time when they weren't using any bus lines, there was not someone who decided, let's create our own transportation system, which doesn't necessarily have to start off as a bus line on the first day, but it could essentially start as a carpool. And then eventually you earn up enough money to maybe get a van. Maybe after you have a couple of vans, you can actually buy a bus and then a couple buses. That's essentially how things happen. No one's saying it would have happened overnight, but things happen gradually. So that's the ironic thing about the Montgomery bus boycott. But regardless of what you have to say about them not having a bus line at the end for themselves, they did stick to what they believed in. And I don't necessarily believe this generation is cut off to boycott things that they love. It's easy to boycott things you don't love. It's easy to boycott Steve Harvey when you're not a Steve Harvey fan. But when Floyd Mayweather does the exact same thing as Steve Harvey, and you really want to see the Conor McGregor fight, so you're going to let it slip with him, but you still going to boycott Steve Harvey because you already don't like Steve Harvey, then your whole boycott is essentially null and void. So back to the issue at hand. Is it right, or is it legit to ask the people who created the Black Panther movie to donate 25% of their profits to the Black community? A lot of people I noticed online were vehemently opposed to the petition, and they felt like the entitlement of Black people is essentially disturbing, that you would feel entitled to the proceeds of a film that you had nothing to do with creating. I understand that sentiment, and I don't necessarily agree that the film should or must or would honestly give 25% of their profits because number one, it's just not going to happen. This is capitalism. And in capitalistic systems, it's always about profit, profit, profit. It's never about benefiting the consumer any more than making them happy with the profit that you gave them. But what I do like about the petition is that I think if you step outside of the asking for 25% of proceeds and think more broader, you can see that Black people are starting to pay attention to our consumer habits. And that is the important thing I took away from the whole idea. No, they're not going to give you 25% of their profits. Some people will say you're not entitled to it. I say entitled is a very it's a very loaded word. It's a very political word. You saying, "Oh, you're feel so entitled." Your understanding of entitlement is essentially created by what the society has deemed as far as property. You know, we're really rare to look at property a certain way. In capitalism, property is always to be kept by the person who owns it and never to be distributed. There are other systems outside of capitalism. There are socialism systems, communism systems, cooperative systems, different type of systems that would challenge that thinking. So I don't necessarily think it's an issue of entitlement. I think it's an issue of being realistic, certainly, because to think that Hollywood, of all things, that is only here to make money and has only showed you that they're here to make money, would actually give money to your community. That's actually just, it wasn't a good assumption or thought to me. But I do think it's important that we become more cognizant of these people that we're giving our money to. Forget about the fact that they're not going to give you the 25%. See what this company Marvel does in the future with that money that you gave them. How do they depict other Black people? Who are they associated with? What other companies are they associated with? How do they pay Black entertainers? Do they have any type of charitable organizations? What do these organizations do? Are they just sucking and taking money? Or are they actually contributing something? These are all things you should be thinking of, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you are a wise consumer and that you are an intelligent consumer. And don't let anyone make you feel bad about being as such. So anyways, that is my perspective. Not necessarily against the petition. I don't believe in a petition, but I'm not going to say that, oh, you're wrong for thinking that. But I think it's a good step in the right direction that we start thinking and understanding that the money that we put out most times is never coming back to us. So how do we become smarter consumers? And how do we consume things in a way that have a reciprocal benefit to our people? So anyways, what are your thoughts? Do you think it was a good idea? You think it was a dumb idea? You think it was a good intentioned idea, but maybe not logical? It's all your opinion, so I'd love to see what you think.